to today's episode of Mental Health is Horrifying. I'm your horror Barbie host of darkness, Candace Green, psychotherapist and all-around spooky bitch, podcasting from my bat-filled cave in Toronto, Canada. As you know, I love witches. I have loved and studied them forever, even during my childhood summers locked away in the public library, poring over books about witch trials and Satan and all that other regular childhood stuff. One thing that interests me most about witches is how they have been scapegoated for almost everything. You name it. Failed crops, winter, impotence, but also unwanted erections. And in Robert Eggers' The Witch, Thomasin is scapegoated much the same way that many children are scapegoated in dysfunctional family dynamics. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's check out The Witch and explore the psychological concept of scapegoating and how it can drive a woman straight to the devil. Hail Satan.
What went we out into this wilderness to find? The kingdom of God. Let us pray.
You've cursed this family.
Who's there? Oh God, my Lord, I now begin. Now help me and now leave my sin. For I repentant now shall be. From evil I will turn to thee.
Let us leave for the wood.
In 1630s New England, English settler William and his family, his wife Catherine, teenage daughter Thomasin, preteen son Caleb, young fraternal twins Mercy and Jonas, and baby Samuel are banished from a Puritan settlement for being too puritanical. They build a farm near a large secluded forest. While under Thomasin's care, Samuel abruptly disappears. It is revealed that a witch has stolen and killed Samuel to use his body to make a flying ointment. Devastated by the loss, Catherine spends her days crying and praying. At the farm, the twins play with a billy goat, Black Phillip, who the children say talks to them, and nobody thinks anything of this. Catherine blames Thomasin for numerous goings-on like her stolen baby, her missing silver cup, and for, breathing too loudly. That night, the children overhear their parents arguing about their possible starvation and making plans to send Thomasin away to serve another family. The next morning, Caleb discovers a hovel from which the witch, disguised as a seductive young woman, emerges and kisses him. As Catherine berates Thomasin for taking Caleb into the woods, William defends Thomasin by reluctantly admitting that he stole the cup. That night, Caleb returns to the farm naked, delirious, and mysteriously ill. Catherine suggests that Caleb has fallen victim to witchcraft and prays for him, of course. The next day, Caleb goes into violent convulsions and vomits a whole apple before passionately proclaiming his love for Christ and then dying. The twins accuse Thomasin of practicing witchcraft, but she in turn accuses the two of them for their supposed conversations with Black Phillip and confronts their father on his intentions to send her away. Angered by his children's behavior, William locks them in the goat house. In the middle of the night, the twins and Thomasin awake to find the witch appearing as an old woman, naked, drinking the blood of a goat. She turned towards them and laughs maniacally, and then continues to bewitch the rest of the family with scary hallucinations and random manglings. At dawn, William finds the goat stable destroyed, the goats eviscerated, the twins missing, and an unconscious Thomasin with bloodied hands. As she stirs, Black Phillip gores and kills him. An unhinged Catherine blames Thomasin for everything that has happened and tries to strangle her, forcing Thomasin to tearfully kill her mother in self-defense with a hook to the face. Now alone, Thomasin enters the goat house and urges Black Phillip to speak to her. The goat responds in a human voice and offers her the life she desires. He's like, "Do you want to live fancy? Live in a big mansion? Party in France? You better work, bitch," basically. Which obviously she's like, "Yes, I do want to live fancy." At which point Satan materializes into a man who kind of looks like a pirate, tells her to remove her clothes and to sign her name in his book. Thomasin, accompanied by Black Phillip in his goat form, then enters the forest nude, where she finds a coven holding a witch's sabbath around a bonfire. The witches begin to levitate. Thomasin joins them, laughing hysterically as she ascends above the trees. One of my favorite things about writer-director Robert Eggers and his films is how historically researched they are. I've previously done an episode on Robert Eggers' incredible film Nosferatu, but he's also known for his films The Lighthouse and The Northman. And for The Witch, all his research took place via the New York Public Library. Seriously, people, use your public library. It's the best resource we have. When Eggers was researching The Witch, he was actually also working as a costume designer elsewhere, and his love and precision for both history and costuming came through really clearly in this film, like knowing the difference between bone and linen corsets and sourcing hand-woven materials when they could afford them. In his research on 17th century New England and Puritanism, Eggers found that the historical text really just depicted people who were encountering the same problems, fears, and anxieties that we have today. You know, worrying that the world is going in the wrong direction, to hell in a handbasket, the stresses of family life. How am I going to provide for my family with the outrageous cost of milk / oh no, the goats are producing blood milk? That kind of stuff. In an interview with Vulture, Eggers actually addresses the complex family dynamics he sought to explore in The Witch, and how they were framed through the lens of puritanical religion. He says, "It endeavors to be more of a pre-Disney fairy tale. I've actually taken credit for this wording earlier, but I'll stop doing it. Mary Louise von Franz is a prominent Jungian, and she talks about how these watered-down fairy tales aren't going to survive because they were designed to fit inside a post-Victorian epoch, and the fairy tales that are earlier and closer to myth, they're just human." One of the things that these early fairy tales do so well is that they unconsciously explore the complex family dynamics the same way myth does. They explore the family dramas, the drama we're all dealing with all the time, through all the relationships in life. I just love how Eggers found inspiration and a lens through which to explore the witch through Jungian psychology and the work of Mary Louise von Franz. She's done so much writing on fairy tales and how we can use them as a lens through which to view our own lives and experiences, and I really recommend you check her work out maybe when you're done listening to this. The origins of the word scapegoat are actually quite interesting. The word was coined in the 16th century when, unfortunately, ritual animals were sacrificed to various gods, deities, or religious entities after the society had placed their metaphorical sins onto the animal, often a goat. To remind us of this fact, The Witch features a goat throughout the movie, lovingly called Black Phillip, who we later learn is the embodiment of Satan, but nobody really looks to Black Phillip as the source of all the havoc that occurs in this movie because, of course not, they choose to blame the teenage girl. Today, the term scapegoat is still used, but we now see it show up in family dynamics. And it basically works the same way as with that poor goat. Scapegoating in families is when a family member is blamed for something bad that has happened or something that somebody else has done. Scapegoating typically occurs to protect the image of a person or the family as a whole. In a family dynamic, a person may be used as a scapegoat to protect a more favored member in the family. Scapegoating tends to start in childhood when a child is blamed for all of a family's dysfunction and problems. A scapegoat bears the burden of taking on the mistakes of the family. When children are assigned this role at a young age, it can lead to really poor developmental outcomes for that child in terms of their mental health, sense of self, and self-esteem. Someone who has grown up being scapegoated may not believe that they are inherently good, worthy, or lovable. Instead, they hear insults regularly, experience constant bullying, and even abuse and neglect. In this dynamic, if one child is being scapegoated, something else that can actually happen is the creation of what's called a golden child or a lost child. So if one child is considered the scapegoat and they are the embodiment of all the family's problems and emotional avoidance and shame, the golden child is the one that represents all of the family's hopes, wishes, but more specifically, can really represent the embodiment of a narcissistic parent's self-view. The golden child is conditioned to be like the narcissistic parent, to be an extension of them. They are not allowed to make any mistakes and can really lose their identity in this way. In The Witch, it's possible that Caleb could be viewed as the golden child because he seems to receive preferential treatment. He's taken out on a foraging expedition with his father. He's not asked to bear the brunt of domestic labor the same way that Thomasin is. So it's possible that he's the golden child in this family dynamic, and he might very well be, simply due to the fact that he's male. And it's no surprise that at this time in milieu, in history, that male children were preferred to female and had a way of having different expectations placed on them. I mean, not much has really changed today, but this was kind of on steroids, as one might imagine in the 1600s, in the middle of nowhere in puritanical New England on the eve of the witch trials. We may view twins Mercy and Jonas as lost children in this family dynamic as the fact that they clearly become possessed by Satan's power, and it seems to be entirely overlooked by their parents, and in general, people just don't tend to pay them much regard or consider them mostly as nuisances and their weird little puritanical children clothing, and mostly just want to get them out of the way and for them to shut up. Especially at a time when the mother, Catherine, is grieving the loss of her baby, who was used as part of the witch's 12-step skincare routine. She definitely doesn't seem to have any time or mental capacity to focus on these twins and sort of pawns them off to Thomasin a lot. And she's also highly irritated by them and kind of just wants them to shut up and go away. Between the baby being stolen by the witch, trying to make it in New England in the 1600s as a family, dying crops, and satanic occurrences, there are a lot of pressures on this family, and they scapegoat Thomasin for basically all of them. Let's take a look at all the things that Thomasin is scapegoated for in The Witch. It's unclear exactly what time of year it is in The Witch, but judging from the clothing that they're wearing, or maybe some of the crops that they're trying to grow and harvest, that it might be the fall. And you have to consider that in the 1600s in New England, It would be quite cold. Conditions would be really hard. They didn't have heating. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have all of the luxuries that we now have today. So this would be a really hard time of the year to survive in. Not to mention that this family just recently left their community because they were not conservative enough for their conservative values. So they're now living in the middle of nowhere where they don't know anybody. They're trying to grow these crops and raise this family. And it just sounds like a recipe for hard times to me. Thomasin tries to help by going into the woods with Caleb to find food, but then she's berated by her mother. And even before the point in the movie when her mother tries to murder her, Catherine discusses with William just straight up sending Thomasin away to serve another family. Bye, Thomasin! So Thomasin is scapegoated for these adverse living conditions, which were selected largely by her father, right? During witch trials, which would shortly be taking place in New England, more people were accused of witchcraft in the darker months. Also, do you know how I know that this was on the eve of the Salem witch trials? I know that the Salem witch trials occurred in 1692 to 1693 because of how many times I've watched Hocus Pocus. And that movie came out in 1993, and one of Winifred Sanderson's songs that she sings is about how it's been 300 years since they were hung for witchcraft. But I digress. You were more likely to be accused of witchcraft at this time in New England if you were female and it was winter. People were more scared during the winter months. There was more uncertainty, food was more scarce, you had to worry about building a fire to keep yourself warm and to prepare food. It was just generally harder. So people got squirrely and started pointing the finger at women and yelling witchcraft. Thomasin is also, of course, scapegoated for the baby in the family being taken away by an actual witch who lives in the woods. She's playing peekaboo with the baby, and in the instant when Thomasin covers her eyes, the baby is taken. And instead of the family focusing on the reality of like, hey, so it seems we have set our home at the edge of the wood where this witch lives and babies are her favorite thing to eat, they direct all their ire and devastation towards Thomasin because she somehow could have prevented this. Thomasin is also quite egregiously scapegoated for the missing chalice in the family home. The one that was of sentimental value to Catherine because it belonged to her father. William sold this family heirloom, so he definitely knows what happened to it, but when Catherine first notices that it's missing, William lets Catherine just scapegoat Thomasin, and he lets this go on for quite some time until he finally admits that he was the one who sold it because the family has been going through hard times. Since scapegoating occurs to protect the image of a family member or a particular truth about the family that the family needs to believe is true, scapegoating can be viewed as a form of emotional avoidance or projection. So let's look at what or who this family is avoiding. Number 1. There is an actual evil witch in the woods who uses babies as part of her skincare routine. Think about it. If you found yourself living next to an angry swarm of murder hornets that were stinging everyone in your family and causing their throats to close in anaphylactic shock, it would be pretty silly if you blamed your daughter for this, right? It might be more prudent to acknowledge the reality of like, shit, we moved in next to a swarm of murder hornets. That's not great. And maybe you would like move or something. Number 2, an unspoken familial anxiety in this movie is the fact that Thomasin is going through puberty. She's becoming a woman, and this is low-key freaking everyone out. Her brother shamefully notices his sister's developing breasts. There's an awkwardness when Thomasin is asked to undress her father and wash his clothes. And the family increasingly is expecting Thomasin to perform more motherly, caregiving duties because only women know how to clean and care for babies, and men are literally incapable of doing this because they don't have hands. And again, if you know anything about witch trials, you could be accused of witchcraft if you are a woman and did literally anything womanly, like go through puberty, menopause, have sex, breathe, etc. Number 3, maybe being so strictly Puritan that they were asked to leave by the other strict Puritans is a red flag. Catherine seems to be largely leading the scapegoating brigade here. So, is it possible that Catherine is avoiding the fact that she is angry at her husband for putting them in this awful situation? I would be mad. Those two definitely need some couples therapy, but again, it's the 1600s, so the best they can do is accusing their daughter of being Satan's slave. Number 4, and finally, and as mentioned before, the family is avoiding the reality that winter is hard, and so is living in the 1600s. I mean, this was a time when families deliberately had more children because the probability of one of them dying or being eaten by a witch was very high. Maybe growing crops in this place is really hard, or maybe you're avoiding the fact that you're just bad at it, and maybe you miss home and your community, so you try to kill your daughter for being a witch instead. That's what we call a maladaptive coping strategy. The word witch was, and still is at many times, a slur. It was a word synonymous with evil, with representing all that is wrong and unholy, sinful. The witch is quite literally a scapegoat for all our sins. But today, being a witch is a very real spiritual path for many. I am a witch, and the best way I can explain what this means is that I live in alignment with earthly cycles. I follow the wheel of the year and observe its 8 Sabbats, like the one that they were celebrating at the bonfire in the end with the levitating and the cackling. That's me 8 times a year. And they really just mark the changing of seasons and how we change along with them. I practice magic, which really just means work that connects me with my intuition, desires, and the world around me, both seen and unseen. It's no surprise to me that many modern witches, like Thomasin, come from strict, puritanical religious backgrounds, because that's the thing with the scapegoat archetype. In the end, the scapegoat can break free. The witch can reclaim the parts of herself that the world tried to burn. It can actually be better to be the scapegoat because they often escape the crucible in the end and are able to reclaim their identity. Whatever those ladies were doing in the woods, it looked amazing. They were minding their own business, communing with nature, making friends, chanting, and really just living their best lives, so leave them alone, okay? This is one of my favorite endings of all time in a movie. I literally remember smiling like Pennywise in the theater when this movie ended because I was so happy when, after communing with Black Phillip/Satan, Thomasin decides that she does in fact want to live deliciously and have butter and cups, and leaves her family to join a coven of witches in the woods.
Wouldst thou like the taste of butter, a pretty dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Robert Eggers has said that the ending of this movie does not suggest that Thomasin really was an evil witch all along. Quite the contrary. Thomasin decided to join the witches in the woods, representing freeing herself from the oppression of the puritanical religion that made her the enemy, the scapegoat, and honestly, that would confine her for the rest of her life. When Black Phillip offered her the chance to taste butter, wear a pretty dress, see the world, I think Thomasin took a look around her at her bummer life and all the carnage and was like, hell yeah, I want to be on a catamaran somewhere. And who wouldn't? Who among us would not positively jump, nay, escape to the woods for the chance to board a satanic catamaran? That, my ghouls, is the story of The Witch. A story about the feminine urge to write your name in Satan's book, disappear into the woods, and levitate with your sisters. Blessed be. Mental Health is Horrifying is entirely written, researched, edited, and produced by me, Candace Green, registered and spooky psychotherapist. If you like this podcast, please consider rating and reviewing on your preferred listening platform. It really helps the show to reach all the other spooky ghouls out there, and I will be eternally grateful. And an eternity is a very long time for a vampire, okay? If you live in Ontario and are interested in psychotherapy with me, I offer therapy for final girls who want to make sense out of the guts of their lives. I specialize in grief and trauma and incorporate both tarot and dream work into my practice as tools to delve deeper into fields of psychic terrain. I offer group programs through the Final Girls Club, including my most popular program, Illuminative Tarot for Working with Trauma, where you can move beyond tarot spreads and use tarot as a supportive partner in the healing process. You can follow me on Instagram at Mental Health is Horrifying, and you can also learn more about me and my services through my website, manymoonstherapy.com. Or you can also howl at the moon and I will hear your call. Bright blessings.